And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Thursday morning's flying weather showing IFR pushing into the southwest coast here and along the Alaska Peninsula up to Kodiak Island. Stays VFR over the interior here, and for the southeast coast, mostly marginal VFR, a little bit better along the central and north coast. For the afternoon, this IFR pushes eastward here, moving into the southwestern Kenai Peninsula, central Cook Inlet, on down to Kodiak Island, covering all of the southwest interior here. Still VFR up to the north and east. And for the southeast coast, marginal VFR along the central and south coast with VFR inland and the Bering Sea here, big swath of VFR right through the west central areas, but marginal for the Aleutians, marginal for the central and eastern Arctic coast. And then for the morning hours Friday, we're looking at some marginal VFR up north there, north of the, around the north slope. IFR still across much of southern Alaska here with marginal VFR from Kodiak Island all the way out to Adak and Atka. And IFR northern and eastern panhandle there, marginal VFR elsewhere. And then moving on to the afternoon, still a band of IFR here, eastern panhandle, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, all along the North Gulf Coast and into southern Alaska, into the northern Kuskokwim Valley, better down toward the southwest there, northern Bristol Bay, but still a lot of marginal VFR in that area. And Shelikof Strait, eastern Aleutians, up here into the central Bering Sea, and marginal VFR there for the North Slope and Arctic coast, and portions of the Berks Range, VFR for Adak and Atka, westward to Shimianatu. And for the passes, for Anatuvik and Adigan, both another VFR day coming up for Thursday. Lake Clark and Merrill, though, starting out with the higher conditions early on, becoming IFR as the day wears on tomorrow. Look for a downward trend for rainy as well, marginal or VFR becoming marginal VFR, possibly IFR late in the afternoon. And for windy, staying VFR, Isabel VFR and Mentesta VFR. Tanita also looking at another VFR day for tomorrow. And Portage, VFR becoming marginal VFR in the eastern entrance, possibly late in the afternoon, or it could be VFR the entire day until probably evening. And then for Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels here with that system coming up, heading northeast, pulling a fair amount of warm air northward here with 8,000 feet there to the south coast of the Alaska Peninsula, 2,000 feet up over northern Bristol Bay, and then 2,000 feet here just over the southern southeast coast. And moving on to the icing graphic here, we've got a band of icing lifting northward here and spreading eastward with that front and the low center. Could be some considerable moderate rime icing here along and just in advance of the front there from southern Cook Inlet across northern Bristol Bay. And so some mixed icing possible here for the southeast coast. And from there, looking at the jet stream, northwest winds 65 to 75 knots there over the north and northeast interior, picking up to about 80 knots out of the northwest across the southeast coast. And then the strongest winds here south of the Alaska Peninsula, but still up to about 85 to 100 knots there, just grazing southern Kodiak Island. And for 9,000 feet, we've got good southwest winds as that low tracks northeastward there up toward the southwest coast. So 50 knots in advance of that over the southwest interior, 70 knots there for the Alaska Peninsula, and 45 knots for south central Alaska here, but much lighter up to the north. And for 3,000 feet, low pressure about the same position here as at 9,000 feet, moving right up to the coastline. And then we'll take a track eastward from this position. And pretty good winds blowing around that center, anywhere from 40 to 60 knots. And much lighter winds for the Gulf of Alaska and the Panhandle, as well as much of the eastern interior. Western Arctic coast, so looking at easterlies at about 45 knots, and the same thing here right over the Kobuk Valley out toward Kotzebue, easterlies at 45 knots. And with those winds, we're looking at considerable moderate turbulence possible anywhere here in the shaded area from eastern Norton Sound, almost all the southwest interior, into the southern Alaska Range, southern Cook Inlet area, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, on out to the eastern Aleutians.